Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where professionals and entrepreneurs publish to grow their businesses and to leave a legacy. We're doing a series of business spotlights of remarkable people, places, and things from across the country and even in your town. Joining me on this segment is Shawn Yesner. He's the founder of Yesner Law, based in Tampa. Shawn, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Shawn, tell us about your specialties and the type of folks that you help.
Yeah, so my background is actually on the plaintiff foreclosure side. And so I was one of the attorneys that worked at what we would call a foreclosure mill. And I was taking houses away from people and did that for about 3 years in the early 2000s. And the law firm that I was working with actually shut down. So what I said was, well, let me take what I know about how to do foreclosures quickly. Let me turn it on its ear, slow them down, and see if I can help people. And so that's a lot of what I do today. I help homeowners who are, in danger of losing their house in foreclosure, and that's extended to other issues. So they got debt, they got credit card debt, student loan debt, IRS debt, all that kind of stuff. I help them get rid of it, and in a lot of cases, get their life and their budget back on track.
I'd imagine in light of this pandemic, financial situations are arising all the time. How has that been affecting your business, and what types of challenges are you seeing people going through these days?
So it's really interesting because the federal government's put a lot of protections in place, and each state has chosen to put some protections in place or not based on what's going on with the pandemic. So yeah, I do see a lot of people that are having trouble making ends meet. I see a lot of people on mortgage forbearance plans or student loan forbearance plans, making deals with the IRS, with their creditors. But the interesting thing is, I have not yet seen an uptick in foreclosures and bankruptcies, largely because of the CARES Act and some of the other provisions that the federal government's put in place. So, it's an interesting economic debate about whether people can continue to survive and thrive when they're not employed, and how do we, as a country, as a local area, as a macro and a micro area, how do we start to dig ourselves out of this? It's a really interesting economic issue, and I don't know that I'm smart enough to come up with any of the answers.
Now, the key word you said is yet. And I've heard a lot of stories on both sides, probably a lot of misinformation, which leads me to my next question, which is, is there a lot of information regarding these forbearances? Is the first time many people are seeing these, and nobody really knows what they're getting into? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think the biggest problem with a mortgage forbearance, what people don't understand, is that it doesn't cure the payment default. All the forbearance does is that you make payments to keep the bank from, they forbear from taking a certain action, like a foreclosure or a collection or whatever. And so I think the biggest issue there that people don't understand is that the forbearance doesn't fix the payment default. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to pair that with like a loan modification or something like that. Here in Florida, where we had Hurricane Irma 3-4 years ago, the banks did what they called these streamline modifications, and it was a very low or no documentation loan modification. You just had to show you were impacted by Hurricane Irma. I think countrywide, we're going to have to do that. Show you were impacted by COVID, or loss of job, or you got sick or whatever, and get some kind of streamlined modification to then fix the mortgage arrears as we start to come out the other side of this. Otherwise, then you got the normal, sell your house, short sell your house, file bankruptcy. You got the normal avenues to fix it.
So, speaking of the word forbearance, it almost sounds like forgiving, and it almost sounds like people have a misconception about what they got into. I have heard information that forbearances are actually damaging to people's credits. Is there any truth to that?
So yes and no. It's not really damaging their credit necessarily, because part of the CARES Act is also not reporting. But what happens is, so let's take an example of if someone were if they got a forbearance from their bank, let's say in April, and we're recording this in December. So they've gone 8 months now without making payments, or 7 months now without making payments. So the bank is not necessarily reporting to the credit agencies that they're behind in payments because they're on this forbearance. But if they approach a mortgage officer or a mortgage lender and say, hey, I want to refinance my house to fix this arrears, the mortgage company that is going to give them the loan then may say, well, wait a minute, you're 7 months behind, so we're not going to give you a loan because you're behind in your payments. It's not a credit issue, but the banks don't like doing what they're calling foreclosure bailout loans. And so it's not really a credit issue, but it does impact their ability to get a new loan.
It's kind of a catch-22 almost, it seems like. What kind of strategies have you seen that are successful then in light of that?
Well, again, we go back to the typical loan modification, just a straight up, I'm going to modify my loan. Hopefully, for the people that have been able to save up money that are on mortgage forbearances, maybe some kind of repayment plan where we're going to pay a lump sum down payment and we're going to pay a little bit more to catch up every month. Bankruptcy, that's where Chapter 13, a payment plan bankruptcy, comes into play. And then at the end of the day, what I'm starting to hear something called a forced sale, which is basically in the Great Recession, 2008 to 2014-ish, people were short selling their homes. Well, now a lot of people have built up equity. So if they're behind on their mortgage and they can't figure out a way to catch up, they can maybe sell their home, pull that cash out, rent for a little bit until their credit gets repaired, and then buy something else.
So going back to the word yet again, do you sort of see this as a bubble, like maybe something's coming?
I do see a bubble. I don't think it's as big a bubble as we experienced again from the 08 to 2014 timeframe, but I do see a bubble forming. I have seen a slight uptick in my practice in terms of foreclosures and bankruptcies, but not the big wave that a lot of us in the industry are anticipating. That hasn't quite hit yet. Plus, now we're into the Thanksgiving, Christmas timeframe, and frankly, people don't want to think about this stuff during the holidays.
So if people aren't quite sure what to do, and it sounds like loan modification is easier than refinance. So it sounds like. So if people aren't quite sure what to do, but they know they have a challenge, are there things that you can help them with, or what? What does it look like to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So now one caveat: I'm a Florida licensed attorney, so I absolutely can help, but only here in Florida. So if somebody is outside of Florida and has one of these issues, I would suggest they contact an attorney in their local area. I'll also take this opportunity to do a shameless plug. I do have a podcast that's called Crushing Debt. It comes out every Thursday. It's on Apple and all the other major podcast players. And so that gives a lot of generic information that people can use, as well as, the great Google and all the, YouTube and all that kind of stuff just to find information. I'm open to people having conversations with me. I can only give legal advice for Florida issues, but I'm open to having a conversation with anybody.
And typically, what is the process if they are in the Florida area to get a hold of you?
So I'll always do a free case analysis, a free consultation, typically 45 minutes to an hour's worth of time. And we'll go over everything. We'll go over all the options. We'll go over what's your mortgage debt? What's your unsecured debt? What kind of credit cards do you have? What kind of student loans, IRS debt, medical bills, all that kind of stuff. And then come up with a plan that's all encompassing. Maybe bankruptcy is a bad idea, but maybe the loan modification is a good idea, or maybe the loan modification is a bad idea and bankruptcy is a better idea. I mean, regardless of what it is, I don't want to be pigeonholed into saying, I got the same tool for every problem. So we'll figure out what the problem is, and we'll come up with a couple of options that are specific to that person. And then, I'll tell them what I think is best. They can tell me what they think is best, and we'll come up with a plan and go for it.
Right on. Shawn, you mentioned you started your firm after your previous firm you worked for closed. Take us back a little further. What inspired you to get into this line of work to begin with? How'd you get started?
So I think I've known I've always wanted to be an attorney since high school. And it's a story of spite, actually. So my father's a CPA. My father's a professional. A lot of the men in my family are all professional. A lot of women too are all professionals. And so I think I knew from an early age that I was going to be my own boss. I think that I was going to own my own business, that I was going to do something beyond my undergrad degree. So I took a law class my senior year in high school just to see if I enjoyed it or not. And that I had prepared a friend of mine. We had a mock trial within that law class in high school. And I prepared if I was one of the plaintiff attorneys and I had prepared a friend of mine to be the plaintiff witness. We did the mock trial. The teacher didn't pick me for the school's mock trial team, but she picked my witness that I had worked with and prepared for so long. And so I think out of spite, I just said, I'll show you, and ended up going to law school and I wanted to be a litigator when I was in law school. I went into law school. I have my background, my undergrad degree is in accounting because of my dad. And so I went into law school thinking I'll be an IRS attorney or I'll be a financial or something. I got bit by the litigation bug when I was in law school, but the first job that I had out of law school was with a real estate attorney. And so I became a dirt lawyer.
Shawn, this has been terrific. For folks out there listening, especially if they're in the Florida area where you can help them, if they'd like to connect with you, especially listen to your podcast, give us all your contacts. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is the website, the law firm's website, which is yesnerlaw.com. And Yesner only has one S in it, YESNER law.com. The podcast, and I've also now written 2 books. The first book is called Crushing Debt as well, and it's a bunch of the podcast material organized into chapters. And then the second one is called Become Debt Free in less than an hour. And so the Become Debt Free book is free, and that's at a different website. That's ShawnYesner.com/become debt free. And Shawn is SHAWN. M is my middle initial for Michael. Yesner, again, YESNER. So ShawnMYesner.com/become debt free, and they can pick up that book for free.
Terrific information, Shawn. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to share with my audience, and I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you.
Shawn Yesner, founder of Yesner Law, and this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where professionals and entrepreneurs publish to grow their businesses and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial. Take care.